Welcome back to the Imaginary Gallery. Today is coming from the Sandra L. Brown book, How to Spot a Dangerous Person. This discussion is regarding the mentally ill person. And of course, she's talking about men, so I suppose we'll use the man for this example, but she states, Sandra Brown states, chances are good that attempting a relationship with a person like Mike will result in a meltdown. For you, getting seriously involved with someone who's suffering from mental illness means a lifetime commitment to someone else's pain. Is that really what you want? The character she describes is Mike the Meltdown. Next, Sandra says that labeling a person who is mentally ill as dangerous presents some socio-political difficulties. Nobody wants to be pigeonholed as an undesirable dating choice based on something they cannot help, like a diagnosis of some kind of mental illness. Which, on the side, I've known several people who sometimes claim to have certain mental illnesses, and they kind of flaunt them like it's something to be proud of. And I'm like, I wouldn't go advertising that. Or they might think they can use it for when you find inconsistencies, they can blame it on the illness. Anyway, ADHD, back to Sandra. And she says, let her say up front that this is not a judgment of people who are mentally ill. She says she treats mentally ill people. Many of them go on to lead honest, nonviolent lives, lives that would seem to disqualify them from being called dangerous. In addition, many people who are reading this book may be diagnosed with one or more of the conditions that she's going to discuss. It's difficult to talk about mental illness while avoiding the stigmas that mental health patients try very hard to escape. Furthermore, not everyone who's diagnosed with a mental illness commits acts that qualify them as dangerous. At the same time, the reason why mentally ill people have earned a chapter in her book is because patients who are diagnosed with some of the conditions described here have a tendency towards dangerousness when they're not under regular care of a psychiatrist, therapist, or community case manager, and or when they fail to take their medications. What qualifies as mental illness falls along a broad spectrum. Few people know enough about the symptoms of mental illness to recognize some of the difficult and pervasive disorders that plague these dangerous people. Discussing every type of mental illness that could affect a relationship is beyond the scope of her book, but the chapter here is just to help you sort out a few of the more troublesome disorders to watch out for. In addition, she's got an appendix at the end of the book that describes in more detail the conditions. But she wants to stress that if you see any behaviors in a person that cause you concern, please take the time to discuss them with a professional. It's better to ask and find out there's nothing to worry about than it is to avoid asking questions, then end up trapped with a monster and getting harmed. But in order to adequately understand the issue of mental illness, we need to move away from the images of mentally ill individuals we've grown accustomed to from the movies. The portrayals depicted in specific movies she lists won't help you detect dangerous people in your own lives. That's because many mental illnesses do not manifest themselves in such dramatic ways, like on the screen. In fact, many people with the mental illness may not even have been diagnosed yet at all. Many have escaped diagnosis either because they've not sought treatment or because their true condition has escaped detection when they've sought treatment. Someone with a clinically diagnosable mental illness may not even know they have one. That means detection, once again, lies with you. She's saying that mental illness finds its origins in many different life circumstances. Some conditions are genetic, meaning they're born with it. It's hardwired into their personality structure, and these problems will not change. Other individuals may have brain chemistry issues that make them unstable, and others have endured extreme childhood trauma that, when combined with genetics or brain chemistry problems, it creates a disorder of huge proportions. Because the causes and symptoms of mental illness fall along such a broad spectrum, it's difficult for her in one chapter to talk about them all. She's basically stating mental illness is a complex tapestry of biochemistry, genetics, and learned behavior that can make a person difficult to treat and even more difficult to live with. The main thing that makes mentally ill people dangerous is the fact that their problems are long-term. If your goal is to eventually find a life partner or even someone whose company you can enjoy for any length of time, why would a person who's mentally ill fit the bill for you? Why would a life of possible hospitalizations, crime, depression, manic episodes, medications, therapy, or instability at home and at work be appealing to you? Perhaps for some people, the word possible creates a loophole that lets them imagine that their partner could be the exception. But professionals in the field of psychology know that the best predictor of future behavior is usually past behavior, and someone's history of symptoms associated with whatever disorder they have can shed light on the possibilities for the future. The one thing that's sure is that with mental illness you can never be sure of the patient's future stability. What he or she looks like, acts like, and functions like today may not be true in a week, a month, or a year from now. Fluctuations in their mental health are based on numerous factors that often cannot be predicted, including stress, other medical disease processes, reaction to medication, lack of medication, or the patient's own biology, which may change as he or she ages. While working in domestic violence shelter, Sandra saw repeatedly a large number of women who sought safety did so from violent men who were also mentally ill. She regularly saw women seeking safety from men who had been diagnosed with antisocial personality disorder, men who were unmedicated schizophrenics, untreated bipolar disorder, and borderline personality disorder. Then you add drugs, alcohol, or stress of unemployment to the mix, and you have a bomb ready to explode. Mentally ill people cost their partners a lot. Yet mentally ill people are another type of person that some targets have a hard time leaving. They evoke great sympathy from those who have it, who have empathy, who mistake their own feelings of pity for passion. These women are willing to stay to avoid the stigma and guilt of being thought of someone who would abandon a mentally ill person. They place their own safety and the children's safety second to maintaining a relationship that's emotionally unstable. Such women or men take a huge gamble. If you can't predict someone's stability, how will you know that you and your children will be safe in the future? Now, who do they seek? An alarming number of people are attracted to people with severe mental illness. Why that's true is an interesting question. She doesn't think that they knowingly seek mentally ill people, but still something in them is drawn to something latent in the potentially pathological person, and a connection's made. Only later, and often too late, do we find out that this person we've been dating is mentally ill. And now, if you were raised by mentally ill parents, diagnosed or not, you're more at risk for dating a mentally ill person, as opposed to someone who was not raised in such an environment. Often people who have dated mentally ill partners later realize that their mother or father was mentally ill, but not diagnosed. They begin to understand why the person's behavior failed to feel abnormal to them. For instance, a history in your family of bipolar disorder can make a person's symptoms associated with the disorder seem less unusual or noteworthy. The type of person who crosses boundaries and carries some function of the career and personal life by dating someone who's similar to a client is often the type of person who would take a mentally ill person home. Those in caretaking professions rank among the highest who end up getting involved with mentally ill people. This includes nurses, medical field workers, social workers, clergy, women, men, and teachers, daycare workers. People who date this type of partner tend to fall into two different categories. Either they date those who are more pathologically dependent, like the permanent clinger we talked about, and the parental seeker, or they date those who are more pathologically unpredictable, like the predators, the emotionally unavailable, or the addicts. And those of us with a chronic tendency to nurture, fix, or guide will find some mental disorders non-threatening. And those of us who have dated clingers or seekers may find personality structures in other mentally ill people similar to those of the clingers and the seekers. So you miss the red flags about what could be possibly wrong with these people. This could include pathological conditions such as a dependent personality disorder, avoidant personality disorder, or paranoid personality disorder. It could also include those who are diagnosed with chronic mental illnesses such as depression, anxiety, or obsessive compulsive disorder, or even mild-tempered bipolars. Others will find some of the behaviors of a mentally ill person similar to those of emotional predators, emotionally unavailable men, addicts, or abusive, violent people that they have dated. These are the ones who could be diagnosed with a pathological disorder such as antisocial personality disorder, borderline narcissistic personality disorder, or a chronic disorder such as post-traumatic stress disorder. Some violent bipolars may find their way into the lives of these types of people. And those who are drawn to them are often ones who they themselves are thrill seekers, who prefer a high speed and exciting life, who like the dramatic ups and downs that keep life interesting, who have a little edge to them, or who have their own personal histories of crime, addiction, or mental health issues. On the other hand, it isn't totally unusual to find mild-mannered, even passive people who like these particular bad boys or girls. Perhaps it's their way of taking a walk on the wild side. Looking at your patterns and determining whether one or both of the adults who raised you were mentally ill may help you see which type of mentally ill person you're likely to select in the future or have selected in the past. The bottom line is the mentally ill man or woman must find a partner who will disregard the disruptive and sometimes pathological behavior and erratic lifestyle. This kind of person needs someone who's hyper-patient or hyper-tolerant and who's willing to forego normalcy for him or her. Alternatively, this kind of person will find someone who likes the chaos and instability that's brought on by mental illness. Some of these people seek partners with their own mental health histories, which often makes for a very combustible relationship. Her research states that many people who end up with mentally ill partners do not exit the relationship even when they have information about the mental illness. As mentioned above, this is often because they don't want to be the type of person who abandons the less fortunate. Many will stay in the relationship even when they learn this mentally ill person's not following the doctor's orders and not getting any care. And as you'll soon see, this is usually a very bad choice. Now, why are these mentally ill people successful? Well, they successfully attract others because most people don't know what the mental illness will mean for them personally in terms of dangerous or pathological behaviors. Although we are a society raised on self-help books, most people have only fleeting knowledge about mental illness and know even less about pathology. For instance, most people understand the basic dynamics of depression and might even be able somewhat to realistically assess the difficulties this condition could represent in a relationship, but they may not realize that severe depression can result in psychotic behavior. We may not realize that the individuals may likely attempt suicide, or if they have borderline personality, that they might do dangerous or illegal behaviors, and they're unmedicated in a manic phase that might have them killing or raping someone. Sandra asks, how many people truly understand how bizarre a person's behavior can get if he or she has a delusional disorder such as schizophrenia and does not take the medication? People end up taking a crash course in Psychology 101 when they date someone in this category. They find out firsthand about instability, the consequences of treatment options foregone and medications untaken, and the ugly face of irrational and scary behavior. Those who have ignored or glossed over the red flags about the partner's mental illness eventually learn enough to be able to teach a class on how to survive when your partner is mentally ill. They learn how to read the signs of an impending emotional crash, how to flee quickly, and how to protect their children, how to get the person placed in a hospital against the will so it'll receive the medication, how to thwart suicide attempts, how to clean up financial messes, and how to reframe the behavior to others so we look less mentally ill. Still, because many people do not want to be perceived as someone who is prejudiced against mental illness, they may stay. Some mistake their pity for the potential. Others hope that the relationship will end for mutual reasons. Some try to love their men or women through enough to cure them. But most people don't understand the diagnosis, so they're willing to wait and see. Well, mentally ill people are initially successful with their partners because some of their symptoms can be hidden. It can take a while to become aware of unusual behaviors that are linked to mental illness, especially if the disorder is cyclic. The partner may be in between some of the more bizarre manifestations of the disorder when you meet, and by the time you realize there's something wrong, many times you're already hooked into the relationship and either reluctant to get out or the lack of skills to do so. With some types of mental illness, this person's response to a partner who's trying to end the relationship can be frightening. Glenn Close, Fatal Attraction. Those who are afraid to end the relationship because of the person's erratic behaviors can end up dating them for much longer than they ever wanted to. They remain in the relationship hoping it will mutually end and that they can be released. This, however, can be a dangerous waiting game. Pathological people in general can be successful because some lack the skills to proactively and assertively end a relationship. And these people know how to flirt and date, but they don't have a clue about how to end things safely. Someone who can't readily get out when they want to shouldn't get involved in a relationship until you learn some exiting skills. That's your takeaway. Because I've noticed that with a lot of people that they don't know how to end a relationship, whether they're mentally ill or not. They find themselves getting into a relationship and, of course, looking for another one on the side privately, and then just switching, which is the cluster B. And who cares if you're hurt by it? Who cares if they led you on? They don't know how to end one, so they find a new one, and then the other one falls apart in some way. But yes, I've seen that in other places, that someone should learn how to successfully end something before getting involved with someone else, which I don't know how you'd practice that, or maybe it's something you do over time. But yes, if you don't have the skills to get out, you're in danger, because the other person probably knows you won't want to get out, and they'll probably hook themselves into your life in so many ways that it's not that easy to just walk away. And if you're dealing with cluster B, a lot of times they'll decorate your house with their belongings, bring their things over and leave them all over the place. So then if you indicate you want to end things, they'll be dramatic and take all their things and leave with them. So then they hope that you'll see that and miss it and think, oh, I made a mistake, come back. And it can be difficult. More later. Have a great evening.
Something over here, I said no, no, no.
I could go to rehab, I said no, no, no. Yes, I've been bad and then I come no, no, no.
I know that you and I grew up in the same neighborhood, and I'm deeply sorry I never really talked to you, but could you do me a favor? I've applied to be on television, so if anyone asks you about me, would you please tell them that I am the nicest person you have ever met? And if you tell them that, I promise you, I will share some of the wealth that I gained from winning with you.
I am Pinocchio. Hey, honey. I love this song. Come dance with me. Hey, it's me. Hey, where you going? You don't want to dance?